Hello, my name is Lia Beck.
That was Luke, the coffee boy, making the squeaky sounds.
Hello, my name is Lia Beck. I'm the communication intern here at Fox Valley Church this summer, and I'm so glad that you're here and watching this video. If you enjoy it or it brings you any sort of encouragement, I want to invite you to give it a thumbs up and to share it with a friend so that they can be encouraged by this as well. Well, we just finished Fox Valley Church on Mission, which was our summer evangelism initiative that we started to encourage and equip you for the purpose of mission. And so as kind of a last hurrah, we wanted to do a video series on 3D living, which is a helpful tool that we use here at Fox Valley Church for evangelism. And the 3Ds stand for developing relationships, discovering stories, and discerning next steps. And so with me today, I have my dad to intro this series and to talk about developing relationships. But before we get into the video, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
My name is Andrew Beck. I've been married to Gina for almost 21 years. I have two daughters, one other one besides Leah, Ariana. My day job, I've been in industrial sales for the last 20 years. That's part of the reason Leah asked me, because developing relationships is a big part of that job. And the current ministry that I serve here at Fox Valley would be the youth group ministry, focusing on the high school students.
And he's been doing a great job running it while we've been in the middle of searching for a youth pastor. So we're super thankful for his leadership, not just him being my dad, but super thankful in general. Transition into developing relationships. In Matthew 22, which is a very common section of scripture that I'm sure most of you know, Jesus talks about the two greatest commandments being to love the Lord our God first and foremost with all of our heart, mind, soul, and strength, and then to love our neighbor as ourselves. Specifically, we see in the parable of the Good Samaritan about how to love our neighbor and who our neighbor exactly is, which is everybody. And so what better way to love our neighbor and to love the Lord and honor him by developing relationships with people? So the first question I want to ask you is, why is this important to you specifically?
So why is developing relationships important to me? I mean, it's kind of twofold, because it's kind of a reciprocating thing, right? Because I want people to develop a relationship with me because, right, I want people to know who I am, and I want to know who people are. So it's kind of a two-way thing. Like, we can't always just go and be like, hey, we want to know everything about everybody else. It's kind of like also the other way around. Not to be known in a boastful way, but it's a two-way street, right? So we can't do this just thinking like, I'm going to go develop all these relationships, because we have to let people into our lives as well, right? Because people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. I know it's a cliche thing, but it is absolutely true, especially when we're going to start, sharing the gospel with somebody.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's so important that someone's not going to be open to sharing if you aren't first open. So creating that vulnerability and honesty in a relationship from the start is so important and so helpful to even get to sharing the gospel, by first earning their trust by showing them what your character is and that you genuinely care about who they are. So how does developing relationships with other people impact the way that we share the gospel?
Right. So, I mean, the deeper the relationship we have with somebody, the more in-depth of a conversation we can have. So maybe you're kind of like first meeting somebody. So a couple weeks ago, we went on that prayer walk, and we were walking, and there was a garage open, and I saw one of those flat top grills in there. I was like, oh, I really want one of those, right?
He's been wanting one for months.
for a while. And then we walked around the block, and then the man was out there, and he was grilling. So I was like, hey, can I ask you a question about that Blackstone, right? So we started talking, and then led me into saying, hey, we're from Fox Valley Church, we're on a prayer walk, and if I ask you about God, what is your reaction, right? So I kind of developed that relationship with him, because it's something I honestly wanted to know about, because I really do want one of these. But and then also showing that I cared enough to hear what he had to say. We took time, and Leo was actually interacting with his kids. It's just something we naturally do. It wasn't because we were trying to trick him in or anything like that. But it was just someone you didn't know. You asked a question about them to really what they want or what their reaction is, and then ask them another question.
Yeah, and by doing that, he formed a connection with that man. So they didn't know each other, they've never met, but right away they formed a connection that I think can earn a little bit of trust. And hey, this person understands a little bit about me, whether it's grilling or something maybe deeper. But I think it's so important to seek to form connections with others in that way. So then to transition into kind of how you do this, how would you typically approach developing relationships with people in your everyday life and the current season of life that you're in?
Right. So everyday life, like I said, it's asking, it's really getting to know them first. Right. So get to know them first without the agenda of I need to get to know them so I can do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to know them, right, because I care about them as a person. I want them to
Yeah.
care, like I say, going back, is I want them to care about me as a person, right? So
Mm-hmm.
we can build that connection, right? And that's showing Christ's love, right? Just getting to know and showing them that you love them. You don't have to have an agenda behind it, right? We're supposed to, share the gospel and that great commission, of course, right? But it shouldn't be like, check, I did that today, right? Like,
Yeah.
and you're gonna
Yeah.
get that gold star. That's not
That's
what about.
good.
It should all come natural. So
Mm-hmm.
at my season of life, right, especially with having kids who are, one in college, one at the end of high school, and I said serving in the youth group, a lot of that is even though most of them all know who Christ is and all that, but you still have to model it, right? Because they're at this stage of life where it's right. We all see what's going on out there. So really trying to model it as
Mm-hmm.
best as I can and answer those questions and keep pointing them towards Christ, right? Because
Yeah.
the world really wants to pull them the other direction. So my stage of life is mainly dealing with teenagers for the most of the part, right? And in my
Mm-hmm.
day job, I'm dealing with professionals, and it's just trying to conduct business in the most God honoring way that I can, right? And it's not always easy, but doing it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what are some questions that you typically ask them?
Um, well, you said, and I think like with the high schoolers, right? They at first, I can come across as a maybe an intimidating guy, but they see that I care about them, right? I ask them questions of what's going on with their life. I'm listening. I'm listening to listen, and that's a hard thing for me because I sometimes want to listen to answer, but it's really listening to listen. It's like, okay, I asked you the question, and I'm going to show you I care enough to
Mm-hmm.
hear what you're saying instead of like, okay, hurry up and ask your question because I know I have an answer even though you didn't ask the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're asking these questions, it's really listening to listen because sometimes we may not have to say anything. They may answer that question for themselves because
Yeah.
they really a lot of times, we have something on our mind and we sit down and we want to talk to someone, we ask the question, but we know they didn't hear us, right? And right there we've kind of shut down that relationship.
Mm.
So when we ask these questions, make sure you're taking the time to listen, right? Because that's just like when we're saying, hey, I haven't heard from God. Well, did you sit and listen to him, or did you just sit there and we say this prayer? It's like, oh, right, I got to go do this.
Mm.
So it's the same as when we're developing a relationship, no matter what it is with another person or with God. We have to ask the question. We have to take time to listen for the answer.
Yeah. And when you're in those conversations with people, prioritize them and prioritize seeking to get to know their
Mm-hmm.
story. So get creative with the questions that you ask and be patient for answers and maybe having a longer conversation than maybe you anticipated, but prioritize that person in that moment and
Mm-hmm.
set aside time just to get to know who they are.
Right.
And I think that that's really good advice.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that complicated. Um, Showing Christ's love and getting to know people for who they are and where they're at in that season of life, so that then you can come in sharing the gospel because you already have a little bit of trust built, a connection built, and that makes it so much easier because then hopefully they'll be willing to listen to what you have to say because
Mm-hmm.
they know that you care about them for who they are and you're not just trying to shove the Bible down their throats or anything like that, like you were getting at.
Right.
Thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for our next two videos about discovering people's stories and discerning next steps. The 3Ds go hand in hand, and it's super important that you are able to understand how to do each step because they grow on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And they're
Definitely.
so important, so helpful, and simple for learning how to share the gospel. So, thank you so much for watching. Stay tuned for more, and we hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
Bye.